Hare Krishna. Om Jnana Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. First of all, let me offer my apologies for not being able to get your physical association there in Atlanta due to the, as you know, the pandemic havoc throughout the world, typical disturbances from material nature. There are so many travel restrictions. So I'm sequestered, I'm curtailed to New Zealand and not able to fly anywhere. But we can try to associate in this way, those of you who are online. And yes, the Varanahastra Lila is very intriguing, maybe perplexing. What is Krishna doing? Is this the Supreme Personality of Godhead doing such, to put it mildly, teenage pranks? To understand this Leela, we first of all must understand Krishna as Parameshwara, the Supreme Controller, and everything as his energy. Secondly, we must understand the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, which echoes Vedanta Sutra, Janmadaya Sitaha. The Supreme Absolute Truth is that from which everything emanates. Everything means everything, even romance, even pranks, jokes. Everything is Krishna's energy. So he's the proprietor. And in his Leela, he's not associating with any material taints. Those who are part of his intimate Leelas have no material contaminations. We are contaminated because we apply our faulty vision to Krishna's pastimes. We apply our material experience, our material vision, and we impose that on Krishna's pastimes, and we miss the point completely. So we have to make peace with the reality that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. So then the question is, what does he enjoy? Many persons can't get to that first proposition, first reality, that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. He's not simply the creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer. He deputes those tasks to expansions, to demigods. But Krishna simply plays his flute and enjoys. Of course, this is what we would love to do. But whenever we try to materially enjoy, there's always work and struggle involved. But as I often point out, Krishna is all play and no work. Therefore, we are envious of him. And that's why we're in the material world. We criticize Krishna for his pastimes, but we want our own pastimes. And we're willing to struggle and work and go through so many ordeals just to have our own pastimes with our own associates. But Krishna's pastimes are flawless. So unless we understand those points, we'll miss the Varanahastra Lila impact entirely. The nectar of such a Lila will be far away from us. This is why we need to be grounded in Bhagavad Gita. Understand what is Bhagavan. He's the possessor of unlimited opulence in the 6 categories: all wealth, all strength, all knowledge, all fame, all beauty, all renunciation, but unlimitedly he possesses those. If we don't understand Bhagavan, then certainly we can't approach Krishna Lila. So let's meditate, first of all, on Krishna Tattva, the science of the Supreme. And then we need to deal with the phenomenon of demigod worship, which is, of course, in India quite rampant. Among those who have been born in the West, it's kind of exotic to them. Of course, in the Western world, you'll worship big politicians, big sports stars, big movie stars, big corporate executives, and you'll beg for their benedictions. But demigod worship to the Western world is relatively unknown. But what we're going to stress now is that whether your preoccupation is with a particular demigod or not, the reality is material desire, and how are you going to fulfill your material desires? The demigod worshippers have limited intelligence. They understand that there are superior personalities in charge of various departmental aspects of human existence, and those empowered personalities apparently can give benedictions. Although, of course, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna will drill down deeper and say, I'm the one. So first, let's begin dealing with the reality of material attachment, material desires, material priorities. Because we may say, oh, I don't worship devas. No. But we can see in our life how we establish material priorities as most important, which is equivalent to demigod worship. Because in order to focus on material priorities as number one, you have to indulge in various yagyas, various struggles, sacrifices. You have to please someone at the workplace, in the office, or customers, relatives. You've got to do all that because of such priorities. And we rationalize to ourselves that, yes, Krishna Bhakti is the best, but for some things, you've got to sort out yourself. For some things, you've got to do the material necessities. And that's exactly what many demigod worshippers say. Oh, Jai Shri Krishna. But when it comes to wealth, when it comes to healing from disease, we've got to take other options. We have to find other recourses because Krishna, he just doesn't seem to have a reputation for coming through on those things. So let's focus on that reality. The equivalency of Deva Puja with material priorities occupying a significant or even number one position in our life. So we look at Bhagavad Gita, and there Krishna speaks 4 verses in which he says Deva Puja is for the less intelligent. He doesn't stop there, because after those 4 verses, he's going to say that those who think he's impersonal, they also have less intelligence. So Krishna is nailing everyone. He's impartial. The first verse in which he talks about demigod worship, many of you know, kamais taistai hitagana prapadyantenya devataha. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires. This is a fascinating concept which characterizes our plight in material existence. Intelligence stolen by material desires. We tend to think that material desires are an innocent thing. It's a personal thing. As long as it doesn't get out of hand, it's all right. Everyone has to have their fair share of this world and enjoy their fair share. And of course, what people call the fair share varies from time to person. Everyone generally thinks, I don't have too much. I'm not greedy, but the other persons, they are causing the world problems. They have too much. I have just what I need and I could use a bit more. But those other persons, they are the materialists. But as I often point out, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna does not judge a materialist by your income, your social status. He says, if you think you're the body, in other words, whether you're rich or poor, if you think you're the body, you're a materialist. Moreover, if you think that your possessions, whether the possessions are 100 rupees or millions of dollars, if you think it's yours, you're a materialist. So Krishna is very impartial. Everything depends on whether you identify with the body or not, and everything depends on recognizing Krishna as a supreme proprietor and using everything that you think is yours, using it in Krishna's service. So, first principle, those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires. Persons want material methods because they think that will remove my suffering and bring me material pleasure. They're not sure that Krishna can deliver that. Krishna, they may even concede, Krishna is all spiritual, but we have material necessities, we have material needs, we have material desires. Demigod worshippers claim that the devas will give immediate relief, like Surya will stop disease, but Vishnu, you just don't know. Krishna is even more mysterious, as we'll hear in the Varnahastra Lila. So therefore, people justify surrender to the devatas. You know they can deliver on time if you do the puja right, do the yajnas right. But Krishna, he deals with stuff like ecstatic love. What's that going to do for anyone? People want things. They want their wealth to increase. They want to be free from disease. They want their properties to multiply. They want their families to expand with the best education. So they're a little unsure that Krishna can deal with all that. Although Krishna has countless sakam devotees, countless devotees who are mixed. They have spiritual desires and material desires. But still, knowing that, we are a little edgy. We're a little on edge. Because as Krishna himself says in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when my devotee, who's a sakam devotee, a devotee who has mixed motives, when my devotee wants something material, I give it to him, but I give it to him in a way that she'll never ask for that again. So that makes us a little paranoid. Now, wait a minute. Let's look at the fine print in this contract. Krishna says, I'm the best physician. What kind of doctor? Our Adigadahar Prabhu was a doctor. What kind of doctor doesn't cure the whole disease of the patient, if possible? So Krishna says, I'm the most expert physician. How can I allow my devotee to go on with these extraneous, superficial desires? So I'll handle his desire program in such a way that he doesn't want it anymore. So that scares us. And therefore, we might think material options are safer. Material options are necessary. Then we go to the next verse of the 4 in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, I'm in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so he can devote himself to that particular deity. So here, Krishna is saying, we're so tiny, we're so dependent that even when we want something other than Krishna's service, we need Krishna's help. Even to worship devas or some materially powerful person or some material option. To do that, we need Krishna as the super soul in the heart to give us the energy and determination to do that. This is how tiny and childlike dependent we are. We can't even fulfill our own material, our own concocted material desires. So we may think, well, we need Krishna to fulfill spiritual desires, but for material objectives, everything's on our shoulders, and we're going to take help of material options, including the devas, just making material priorities topmost in our life. And often people say, I'm just doing this temporarily. When I'm 65 or 70, then Krishna will be number one. But for now, I have to be in the money-making phase. For now, I have to be in the family expansion phase. And then there's children, and then there's grandchildren, and then when I'm 75, then I will focus on Krishna's service. So this goes on and on and on. This establishing of material priorities in the topmost position in our life is what demigod worshipers do. We've got to do the necessary, they feel. So an interesting point is raised by Prabhupada in the purport about how Krishna says he makes the demigod worshiper's faith steady so that the demigod worshiper can devote himself to that particular deva. So the question arises in the purport, why does the all-powerful Supreme Personality Godhead give facilities to living entities for trying to enjoy illusion? He shouldn't do that. But you can't blame Krishna for that. As the super soul, he's neutral. As the super soul, he allows for your independence. There's no meaning to independence if you don't have facilities to misuse your independence. Independence has no meaning if there's just the pure bhakti option. If there's just the spiritual world, then how do you have independence? There's only one option. But Krishna, because he's supremely independent, he has given you a tiny characteristic that he has. He's given you independence, but in a very tiny degree. I remember when I was 12 years old, and one of my school teachers asked the class, how much allowance do you get from your parents? And this is back when a dollar had much more value. So I said, well, my allowance is 50 cents a week. Other persons in the class said $1, $2 a week. These middle class students. So I went to my mother and said, what is this? I'm just getting 50 cents. 50 cents a week means 3 16-ounce Coca-Colas with 5 cents left for a candy bar. So I said, Mother, you got to give me more. What can I do with 50 cents a week? She looked at me and said, you want money? Go out and get it. Oh, is that what it's all about? Okay. So by the time I was 14, I was financially self-sufficient. Now my mother laments, I taught you how to be too independent. You never stayed at home. Still, even though when I was getting my 50 cents a week allowance, it was a facility and I used my independence. And you might say, oh, what's the use of independence with a 50 cents a week allowance? But it is independence. I could choose. Okay, will it be 3 Pepsi Colas or 3 Coca Colas? Which candy bar will it be? Mars or Snickers or whatever? Anyway, that's American stuff. So it's still independence, and I had some facility. My point is that Krishna has given us minute independence. That phrase you know from Shastra. It is independence, but it is so tiny. There has to be a facility for us to exercise our options. And therefore, welcome to the material world. So you can't blame Krishna. You can't blame the super soul. He's in your heart. He knows your desire. And he tries to get you to turn to him. But at the same time, he respects your independence and provides you material facility. Even he provides your dedication to worshiping a demigod. He knows this living entity wants to worship a particular demigod. I'll give him the strength to do that. Of course, in Bhagavad Gita, he doesn't advise that you do this. In Bhagavad Gita, he simply advises, you surrender to me. But he recognizes that not everyone's going to do that. So he's pointing out, even when you want to avoid me, you still need my help. Another way of looking at this is that the demigods cannot empower a living entity with the necessary energy to worship them. They're big, big demigods, but they still lack that ability. And Krishna says, I'm the one who does it. The impetus comes from Krishna. In the next verse, Krishna, continuing the same theme, says, endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and he obtains his desires. But actually, I'm the one who bestows those benefits. So Prabhupada wants us to get the point very strongly. So in the purport, he says, a living entity goes to demigods, usually because he's mad to fulfill his lust. That sounds a bit strong to us, doesn't it? We're just being expedient. We're being practical, pragmatic. We're just adopting necessary recourses, necessary options to fulfill our goals. So why is it that that's considered? Why is it that doing that is considered being mad to fulfill lust? You have to have a deep understanding of madness and lust. It relates to anything that is separate from Krishna's desire. The distortions from such mentalities block our access to Krishna. So then, the last of the quartet of the 4 verses in Bhagavad Gita in which Krishna decries as less intelligent demigod worshippers. He says, men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. Krishna's making it clear. It's not that all worship takes you to the same goal. Just like, although your body has so many parts, it's not that by putting the food between your toes, it's going to get to your stomach. You have to know the authorized process for eating, which is to put the food in the mouth. Similarly, the authorized process for living a sane and normal life is to focus on Krishna. Even though the demigods are his agents, you can't bribe them. You've got to go straight to the top. Krishna wants you to understand that what you get from the demigods is temporary. Why? Because the demigods are temporary. If you want something eternal, you go to someone who's eternal. It's common sense. Bhagavad Gita is indeed about common sense, but we make it into such a difficulty. Oh, what Krishna asked for in Bhagavad Gita is it's very difficult. I don't know if I can do it. This is why Krishna comes as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He says, I spoke so simply and clearly in Bhagavad Gita, and they have difficulty even swallowing that. All right, I'll come as my own devotee. I'll come as Mahaprabhu, and I'll just give everything away. That's Sri Chaitanya, Sri Nityananda. So then after this quartet of verses, Krishna goes on to those who think that he was impersonal and then assumed a personality. This is very common in India and the West. There's the all-pervading spirit that has appeared as Krishna, as Rama. People talk like this in India. Metaphysical people in the West talk like that. No one practically can easily accept that the ultimate is personality, Purushottam. That's why we're so dependent on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise, we would just speculate that ultimately the absolute is formless, qualityless, activityless Brahman. In India, they know what Brahman is, maybe until recently. In the West, they know nothing about Brahman. They just say, the whatever. And then their associates go, ooh, the whatever, yes. So now to the Vadhanahastra Lila. We're going to Krishna's favorite month, Margashirsha. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, of months, I am Margashirsha. And he says, of seasons, I am flower-bearing spring. Now, what's so special about Margashirsha, that month? Roughly November, part of November to December. It's a time when in traditional village life in India and during the time of Krishna Lila, it's harvest time when the grains are harvested. So everyone's in a happy harvest, joyful mood. So that's why Krishna says, of the months of the year, I am that. Everyone loves spring, of course, because it's neither too hot nor too cold, and the flowers are blooming, and it's a refreshing time after the winter. But still, Krishna says he chooses a winter month, the beginning of winter, November, December, Margashirsha. Of months, I am that. And it's the time when the unmarried Nitya Siddha Gopis started thinking about marrying Krishna, having Krishna somehow as their husband. So they decided to perform the month-long vrat, vow of worshiping the demigoddess Katyayani. So their parents were happy that the girls were thinking about husbands because, in traditional Vedic society, girls are married at that young age. So it was natural. So the parents were enthused. Oh, yes, you're thinking to marry. You want to worship Katyayani. that's nice, but don't take such austere vows that you destroy your beauty, your health. The parents are very concerned about that. Maybe better not do it. This is what Kavi Karnapur explains. Maybe better not do it. We like that you're thinking about marriage. It's natural for young girls of your age, but just don't take a severe Katyayani Vrat. The young Gopi girls were disappointed to hear that. They wanted to move right ahead because they're simply thinking about Krishna. How can Krishna be ours? They weren't going to tell their parents that, though. So they were so possessed by the burning desire to associate with Krishna that they would wake up in the middle of the night, overwhelmed with this desire for Krishna. Oh, if we could only have that kind of Krishna consciousness. Wake up in the middle of the night. Where is Krishna? How can I serve Krishna? How can I be with Krishna? So the parents questioned them. Okay, you want to do this vrat? Who's the acharya? What kind of mantras are you going to be using? So the young gopis replied, our acharya is the mind, our own mind. That's their coded way of saying we're always thinking of Krishna. He is our mind in terms of our mind's preoccupation. So therefore our mind is the acharya. And they said the mantra is vibrated constantly throughout the night by the acharya, the mind. Of course, the mantra is they want Krishna. The parents, of course, didn't really understand the answer. So this Katyayani Vrat is indeed austere. Eating for 1 month boiled dal and rice with no spices. Can any of you do that? Can you do it for 1 day? Everyone knows if you've grown up eating spiced food, to eat rice and dal with 0 spices that's boiled, you'd think you're in a hospital. But that's the vow that the gopis undertook. The idea is that such food is supposed to purify the body before you enact a ritualistic ceremony. These are all Vedic procedures. So how do they begin their execution of the vrat? They met together in the night before and made secret plans to rise at dawn. And together they would go to the Yamuna. So they did that. It's cold at that time of the year in the morning, but they didn't care. They just were focusing on achieving Krishna. And they wanted the help of Katyayani. Later, we'll talk about whether we should consider Katyayani to be the material Durga or the spiritual Durga, because you can also call the demigoddess in charge of the internal potency. You can also call her Durga. But then again, even if you consider, as Prabhupada explains, that they were worshiping the material goddess, the consort of Shiva, Parvati, still they're showing that we'll do whatever it takes to get Krishna. And we'll hear later that even while worshiping Katyayani, they're actually just purely worshiping Krishna because they're so focused on Krishna that they were burning with a desire to serve Krishna. And that just overrode any limited demigod puja aspect. But then again, looked at from another point of view, Katyayani is Yoga Maya. Mahamaya is a department of Yoga Maya. So you can look at this lila from different angles. But from whatever way you look, from whatever perspective, the gopis are unquestionably 100% pure. No material motivation. Whether you say they're worshiping Durga as ordinarily known in order to achieve Krishna, or they're worshiping Yoga Maya. All right, they meet in the morning and it's cold outside. What are they doing? They're proceeding toward the Yamuna, making the most beautiful kirtan. Oh, if we could only be there for that kirtan. They're playing Venas. They have perfect rhythm, perfect harmony. You see, all the arts in their pure form originate in Goloka Vrindavan. They're singing Krishna's glories. And as they're walking along with this kirtan, as they're walking toward the Yamuna, they're holding hands. Why? There are several possibilities, the acharyas point out. Number one, they're holding hands because it's dark. They could easily stumble and fall. A more confidential reason why they're holding hands is that they're so overwhelmed with ecstasy, singing Krishna's glories, that they might faint. So they're holding each other's hands. So they arrive at the Yamuna. And Kavi Kanapur points out that they have their bathing clothes. They first enter the Yamuna with their bathing clothes, and the Yamuna is ice cold. Even before they enter the Yamuna, on the banks, on the bank of the Yamuna, they're putting on their bathing attire, and they're shivering, their lips are quivering, their Kavi Kanapur says they're slapping their arms and crossing their legs, just demonstrating how cold it is, but they're doing that in ecstasy because it's all to attain Krishna. All these austerities are to attain Krishna. They enter into the Yamuna, they come out, and they dress themselves. After drying, they dress themselves with fine garments because they're about to do a yajna to please Durga. So therefore they dress very nicely. All the paraphernalia for the puja has been brought by their maid servants, confidential role, maid servant of the gopis. So then they begin to do the puja. You first have to install the deity. They make a deity of sand on the bank of the Yamuna. First, they have to find the best spot where there are no tracks from animals and birds, where the wind won't blow everything away. So they do that. They find the best spot on the bank of the Yamuna, and they make a deity out of sand and put an asana there for the deity to come and sit on. Amazingly, even before their puja begins, they know that Durga is present, attracted by their pure bhakti. Even before the puja begins, Durga is already there. And so they begin the puja, and every time they offer an article, whether it's food or cloth, fine cloth, or whatever article they offer. they always say, please accept this and give us Krishna's association. Make us an associate. Make us an associate. Make us an associate of Krishna. Give us the nectar of Krishna's touch, the nectar of Krishna's lips. Every time I'd offer an article, there's always, Katyayani, please give us Krishna's association in this way, in that way. And they offered their famous mantra, which is actually a perfect mantra, a siddha mantra from time immemorial. It's there in Bhagavatam. Katyayani Maha Maya. They're referring to Katyayani as the great potency of the Lord. Mahayogin Yadishvari. You are the greatest mystic. You possess the greatest mystic power. Adishvari. You're the mighty controlleress. What is it that we want? Nandagopa Sutam Devi. Oh, most splendid one, Devi. Nanda Maharaj. Nandagopa, the king of the cowherds, has a son, Sutta. Patame Kurute Namaha. We beg you, we offer our obeisances to you. Please make him our pati. Make him ours. So this is the reason why they're worshiping Katyayani. Katyayani has other names. Bhadrakali, Vaishnavi, Bhagavati. So again, even if you just say Durga, that can also refer to Yogamaya, the demigoddess in charge of the Yogamaya potency, which assists Krishna in his pastimes. It doesn't have to exclusively refer to the material, to the demigoddess in charge of the material energy. But again, even if you think that they're referring to the demigoddess Durga in charge of the material energy, still, what is their motivation? 100% intense focus on getting Krishna. Their longing for Krishna was so intense. Katyayani Mahamaya, Mahayogin Yadishvari, Nanda Gopa Sutam Devi, Patame Gurute Namaha. Gokuleswari, the controller of Yogamaya in Goloka Vrindavan, is also Katyayani. So you have to know these intricacies of the spiritual energy and how the spiritual energy works. But that's all right. As we said again and again, even if you think they're worshiping the demigoddess in charge of the material energy, it's all 100% for Krishna. So what is happening? They do this month-long vrat. On the day before the vrat ends, they feel the presence of Katyayani in their hearts. Kavi Karnapur explains this. In their hearts, Katyayani is telling them, you have pleased me. I'm so impressed by your dedication to obtaining Krishna. Your hopes, your desires will be fulfilled. So they were all happy. They felt Katyayani's presence in their heart right before the end of the month-long vrat. And somehow or other, the Nandagopa Sutta was going to be theirs somehow or other. Now, The next day was the last day of the Vrat. And that's when Krishna shows up. They were joyfully bathing in the river. They had finished their Vrat, the last ceremony. They were having water sports, joyful. And they had disrobed completely. The Vrat was over and they were bathing in the water. It was still cold because it was early in the morning. The sun had just started to appear. So there they are, splashing, enjoying in the water. Krishna had already gone to the forest with the cowherd boys and Balaram. But he took leave of the cowherd boys and Balaram and started proceeding toward the Yamuna with just some toddlers, some 2- and 3-year-old boys who couldn't tell male from female or anything. Krishna knows how to arrange his pastimes, and Lila Shakti, his pastime energy, helps. So Balaram and the cowherd boys weren't there. They were just these wee toddlers, these little toddlers who couldn't bear separation from Krishna when he went to the forest with the cows. So somehow these toddlers some or other came along, and Krishna brought them with him. Innocent babes completely. Krishna knows how to package everything perfectly. So as he approached the Yamuna River, Kavi Karnapur describes how Krishna arranged himself. He was walking very stealthily. He tucked his hair under his turban. He lifted up his dhoti, and he silenced his ankle bells. This is a real stealth operation here as he approached the Yamuna. His little toddlers that were surrounding him were chattering. So Kavi Karnapur says Krishna gave them a stern look. Shut up. We've got to be quiet. So in that way, Krishna approaches the Yamuna, and like a thief, he gets the clothes of the gopis and slings them over his shoulder, and then climbs a tree and waits. So the gopis are splashing and enjoying in the water. And then it's time to come out. They're realizing it's cold in the water. And they look on the bank of the Yamuna. Where are the clothes? Where are the clothes? So that sets off a whole discussion with Krishna. They're simultaneously in distress and happy. In other words, we get what we want, but not this way. This is not how we want our desire fulfilled, but we do want our desire fulfilled, but not like this. So they're dialoguing with Krishna. That you can't do this. We're going to report you to King Kamsa. Krishna says, well, I don't care about King Kamsa. You can do whatever you like. It's getting cold in the water. They're talking amongst themselves. Maybe you can, they tell another gopi, maybe you can say something clever to counteract his word jugglery. It's getting cold in this water. We need to come out. But they can't defeat Krishna. And they see he's determined. And inwardly they're pleased. So let's once again repeat that this pastime has nothing to do with the material energy, has nothing to do with material bodies, has nothing to do with any material contamination to the slightest degree. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. And these are his Nitya Siddha Gopis, eternally liberated. And unless we understand the absolute truth as containing unlimited variety and the source of everything, we can't understand this lila. How can it be completely pure? Because Krishna is the supreme pure. And in order for those gopis to be in his lila, they have to be supremely pure. All they're thinking about is Krishna's enjoyment. That's all. No other thought. No material lust, no material pride, no material envy. Whatever makes Krishna happy, that is Vrindavan. So what apparently is demigod worship is actually 100% focused upon Krishna's pleasure. Because, you see, it's important for us to understand that, because sometimes people say, but the gopis, Krishna's dearest beloved, worship demigods. All right, you want to say that, but what was their 100% goal? A goal so intense that it just dispelled everything else. Their goal was Nanda Gopa Sutam Devi Pattam Me Kurute Namaha. That was 100% their goal. Krishna is a supreme enjoyer. There's nothing you can do that diminishes that status. Why would you want to diminish that status? He does everything we would want to do, but he does it perfectly and purely. He's the ultimate source of everything. Even mischief. He was just 7 years old, by the way. So if you want to judge him materially, how can you judge a 7-year-old for stealing the girl's clothes? Of course, Krishna can act any way he likes at any age. But if you want to be material, just consider he was only 7 years old. And the associates with him were toddlers. So from so many angles, we can understand Krishna's perfection in this apparently controversial lila. But there's actually no controversy. Krishna is Om Purnam, perfect and complete. He's simply consorting with his own energies. We're so quick to forget that Krishna's a proprietor. And we're so quick to think that we are the proprietor. Therefore, we accuse Krishna, what are you doing with those girls? Krishna is just dealing with his own energies. But in our material existence, we're so quick to call things our own. And then we accuse Krishna of acting according to what he truly is, the supreme proprietor and supreme enjoyer. So these are some points we can learn from this very interesting lila. All right. What should we do now, Adi Gadadhar Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, this was such a mesmerizing and sweet class. I have never heard this lila explained so beautifully. You transported us to the Margashirsha month in Vrajadham with your very, very nectarian narration from Srimad Bhagavatam and Anand Vrindavan Champu of Kavi Karnapur. Thank you so much. Very, very grateful to you. So Maharaj, if you can spare a few minutes, we can open it up for questions. Would that be okay?
All right, a few minutes.
Yes. Few minutes, okay. So dear devotees, if you want to ask any questions to Srila Devamrita Swami Maharaj, or you want to make any comments, please raise your hand. Okay, we have 2 hands raised. So Geeta Mataji, please go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you so much for your darshan and the lecture. It's been a long time. I had a question about surrender. You talked about surrender, and Krishna also talks about surrender in Bhagavad Gita. So could you please explain practically what does it mean to surrender?
I like the way Srila Prabhupada explained this once. He said, when Krishna says, Sarvadharman prajaja mamekam sharanam vraja, surrender to me, he's saying, you shut down your plan-making factory and you accept my plans. Just consider that we have plan-making factories we have our own architectural design team, our own project managers in our mind, and they're busy turning out concocted plans for how to control and enjoy the material nature. Krishna says, surrender to me. He means shut all that down and just take my plan. Then you'll actually be happy and you'll have no worries and no fears. Otherwise, I think you might become intimidated by this word surrender. I often explain this. You think it's maybe like you're walking down the street in Atlanta and out from the shadows emerges a mugger. Surrender your wallet, surrender your purse. So we get tense when we hear Krishna say, surrender to me, because we have such paranoias and we're so attached to what little we have. But actually, Krishna is simply saying, give up your tiny, futile plans and accept my plan. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj. That was a beautiful answer to a very nice, thoughtful question. So, Rebecca Mataji, you can go ahead. And after that, Preeti Vilasini Mataji. Rebecca Mataji, can you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Hare Krishna, Devamrita Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I have two questions. My first question is, where is Radharani there in this lila with the gopis? Like, where is she? And my second question is, I just want to know how you're doing, how's your health and everything during this pandemic time. Thank you.
Okay, the second question, which is easier to answer, but I will answer the first one. The second question, how am I doing? I am in New Zealand at the moment, and I say at the moment, there's no COVID in New Zealand, but I can't fly out of the country easily. There are practically no flights, and if I would come back, I'd have to be in 2 weeks quarantine in a hotel, eating hotel food. And so the other GBCs of ISKCON have all advised one another to stick to a safe situation right now, because most of us who are GBCs are in the prime age group that COVID likes. And unfortunately, we learned that lesson in a very devastating way with the departure of His Holiness Bhakti True Maharaj. So I am here in New Zealand. Within the country, everything is functioning normally, but you just can't go out. As I said, there are very few flights. I won't get any travel insurance because the government has advised that no international traveling, so the insurance companies will not accept any claims, and practical things like that. I don't have medical coverage in the USA. So I don't want to burden devotees if something happens to me. So for all those reasons, beyond my control, I'm here in New Zealand. And we're focusing on doing preaching here. Just a few days ago, the Prime Minister received a Bhagavad Gita at an event and said, "Oh, I always wanted to read this." So, first question, where was Krishna's most confidential devotee? We speak about such topics, such a person with great respect, holding such subject matter high above our head. We speak very carefully with reservation. The Acharyas point out that on the last day of the Vrat, Srimati Radharani was invited by the Brajkumaris, the unmarried Gopi girls. You see, if you want to know some advanced details, Krishna's pastimes are full of variety. Therefore, he has unmarried gopis and married gopis. So on the last day of the Vrat, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Vrajakumaris, the unmarried gopis, invited Srimati Radharani. Okay, enough.
Thank you, Maharaj. Please stay safe, and we hope that we will see you in Florida soon.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Priti Vilasini Mataji, you can go ahead now.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thank you so much for such a wonderful class. Maharaj, my question is about the boons given by demigods. As you were saying that the demigods themselves are temporary, so the boons given by them is temporary. In a practical way, how do we understand this point? Meaning, if there is there's an ailment for a person, and that person is approaching a demigod, and that demigod kind of satisfies that person by giving them a boon to recover, then in that case, my question is, does it mean that it is temporary, meaning the karma that he has to exhaust will be continued in the next birth, and the demigod's boon was just a temporary relief? Or the demigod can really remove that ailment and that person doesn't have to suffer the remainder karma in the future? How do we understand that, Maharaj?
By engaging in karmic activity, there's always a reaction. So even though you're doing an apparent solution, you're implicating yourself more in the material energy. And even if you stop one disease, the disease's grandchild comes next. So you haven't really, you just transferred the burden from one shoulder to the other. You haven't gotten to the root of your problems.
Thank you.
You haven't solved the problem of material existence, but you become proud. Oh, I worship Surya. I don't have this disease anymore. What about the next disease and the next disease? And there's so many other problems that come your way. So you become addicted to stopgap solutions.
Yes, Maharaj. Yeah, I understand. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Take care, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Shastragrit Prabhu, would you like to unmute yourself and say something? Shastragrit Prabhu?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Shastragrit Prabhu.
I'm in book table and I was listening to the class with some of the people that were interested in books, and it was wonderful.
All right. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna, humble obeisances.
Well, thank you very much, Adigadahar Prabhu.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much for this beautiful class. And please accept our gratitude. Dear devotees, please unmute yourself and please thank Srila Devamrita Swami Maharaj by together loudly chanting 1, 2, 3. Hari Bol!
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Hari
Maharaj.
Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
All right.